So I'm in Switzerland, and I am at the station before Zhang, I forgot it now, Zhang, basically the highest point in highest train station in Europe. The top of Europe is what they call it. And I'm waiting for the train that's going to take me up there. It's like this cogwheel train, so it's going to be pretty cool. Pretty snowy up there. You can check out the scenery. Pretty awesome scenery. Anyway, I thought I'd do a video with this awesome scenery and talk about or answer a question I got from Joe. So I got this question from Joe, and Joe said that he got fired about 2 months ago, and he's had some phone interviews since then, and he's had some trouble with explaining him getting fired, and he wants to know how he should approach this situation with getting another job since he's been fired from his previous job. And he said that part of the reason why he got fired was he introduced this bug into a production application, and then what ended up happening was they put him on probation, and then they eventually terminated him. So first of all, Joe, the first thing I'll first give you, one thing that you should have done, which is you should have quit. You know, you should definitely, when you see the end coming of anything, don't let someone else beat you to it. If you know you're going to get fired, quit before you get fired. Don't get fired. It'd be much better to have the story to be able to say that you quit, rather than to say that you got fired, which is going to be a lot more difficult to explain. So that's the first thing I'd say. But I mean, you know, bygones are bygones. You've already made that slight blunder, so you can't retell history, right? I mean, I'm not going to suggest that you lie. If you said, you know, that you quit, that would be lying at this point, and not a good idea. But if you saw the writing on the wall and you were on probation and you knew you're going to get terminated and you quit, then you could say, well, I quit because it didn't work out, you know, and you could explain how it wasn't a perfect match for you. But in this situation, I was trying to think of, you know, what to do here, and I think there's two ways to go about this. The best way to go about this is to avoid the question altogether and not address the question. Most of the time, people are not going to ask you what the circumstances of you leaving your past job was. I mean, not the details, right? If you just leave it at, well, it didn't work out, it wasn't a good match for you, I think you can leave it there and not give any more details on that unless they probe further, right? And that's probably going to satisfy most people's questions. I think the fact that you're thinking about this so much and thinking about how to answer this question and how you're going to address this, you're sort of volunteering information that you don't necessarily need to. Now, again, I'm not advocating lying. I definitely, you know, if you get asked directly, you know, and you get probed on this, you need to come clean and tell the truth. But if you can avoid it completely as much as possible, just don't mention it. Just say that it didn't work out. Just say that, you know, it was time for you to move on. Those are all true statements. They're not lies, right? It obviously didn't work out, and it definitely was time for you to move on. You know, one of the biggest signs for it's time for you to move on out of a job is when they fire you. They're telling you it's time for you to move on, right? And they're probably telling you it's not a good match as well. And so if you come from that perspective, I think you're not going to get questioned much more on that, but you could. I mean, it could happen for sure. And if it does, the second approach, and to some degree these might not be combinable because it might look like you're trying to pull something. So you have to be careful how you handle this when you say it didn't work out. You know, and you say, well, you know, here's the complete details. If you want the complete details, if they keep on probing you, which is you turn this into a hero story, right? So you turn this into a positive. I talked about this a lot before on job interviews. You can check out my book, The Complete Software Developer's Career Guide, here where I talk about this. And I think in the bonus content for that, I talk about this idea of, you know, when you're making a resume and you want to take your weaknesses, answering that weakness question and turning it into strength, and basically telling like a hero story of how you went from, you know, some weakness and how it became a strength for you. But in this case, what I would do is you got to be pretty careful with this because it's only 2 months ago. So it's really hard to have that kind of hero. It's, you know, past things like you know, you were a convict 10 years ago and now you're like, you know, a CEO of a company. Cool, right? You robbed a 7-Eleven 2 months ago. and you learn from that, harder to sell, right? That's harder to sell. So this is going to take a little bit of skill, right? The more distance there is, the more the second approach is going to be advisable and possible, and actually maybe even be a benefit. But the closer in time, the more recent your mistake, the more people are going to associate you with that mistake and not what you learned from it. So what I would recommend is that you basically frame it in as positive as possible and say, look, here's what happened. I'll tell you, I made a mistake. I was foolish in creating this bug in production. And the way you want to do it is you want to admonish yourself enough so that you're taking fully the full responsibility, so that the other person who's listening to this story, they basically start defending you. They say, well, that's not your fault. You couldn't have known. Everyone writes bugs. They're going to just fire you because you did pretty. But you got to really be emphasizing that you're taking full responsibility and full ownership for it, and you have to mean it, because you have to really do some soul searching and figure out how it really was your fault. If you come in with the attitude and you think it wasn't your fault and you're unjustly fired and all this, it's gonna come across and it's gonna project that way. So you got to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm gonna actually start walking so I don't miss my train here, but that's what you got to do, is you got to basically project that it was your fault, take full responsibility, explain the situation, and then you got to turn this into what you learned from it, right? And you got to say, look, and here's the thing, I understand what I did wrong. It's actually a good experience for me. It humbled me a little bit, made me really realize, like, I'll never make a mistake like this again, because I learned from this, and I'm kind of glad that it happened. And and you got to address those things up front. The other thing you got to do is you got to disarm people, right? So I do this all the time on this YouTube channel. When I'm about to say something controversial, sometimes I'll disarm people, and I use this a lot of times in conversations, especially with someone that has a negative opinion of what I'm about to talk about, or of me, or something like that, which is to disarm them, meaning that what is going to cause them to become defensive ahead of time, or what weapons they're going to pull out, and you address those up front. So let's say that you show up late for something. An example of disarming someone, for that conversation, you're like 30 minutes late, to say, I am an ass. Seriously, like, the first thing you say when you come to them is say, seriously, like, I'm an ass. Like, I'm totally late. Like, it's inexcusable how late I am. I didn't give you a call. Totally late, right? That disarms them. Because if you come in and you start trying to explain the situation and start trying to explain yourself, then it actually has the opposite effect. Then they're going to accuse you more. They're going to feel like you're trying to weasel out of it, right? Whereas if you disarm them. So think about the kind of objections and questions that they're going to have, right? In this case, they're going to say, well, they're going to have a problem with the bug that you created. They're going to have a problem perhaps with the circumstances in which you got fired, and you can say, look, or they may just be cautious in hiring someone that had gotten fired previously. So instead of not addressing that, instead of leaving that off the table, bring it onto the table. Say, hey, look, I know, I'm telling you the story, I'm telling you the truth, but I know that it's pretty likely. I mean, I'm not sure that I would be gung-ho about hiring someone who told me that they got fired from their last job 2 months ago. I totally get that viewpoint, so I just want to let you know why you should trust me, even though I would have the same perspective as you, right? So that's a disarming statement, right? Any kind of objections that they're going to raise, right? This is a good sales and marketing technique as well, but any kind of objections that that they're going to raise based on what you're doing, that's what you want to address before they address it. If they beat you to the punch, right? If they address it first, just like I said, that example, if you show up late for something and someone says, hey, you're like 30 minutes late, now you've lost it. Now you've lost control of the situation, and you're going to be admonished, right? But if you self-admonish, if you self-acknowledge, if you disarm that ahead of time, so that's going to be your best strategy, really, is to avoid it, and then if you can't avoid it, then to come completely clean, take full responsibility for the problem. Don't blame it. Make sure couch it in such a way that you're taking so much responsibility that they are going to tell you that you're innocent, and then refuse it. Then when they say, no, it's not really your fault, and everyone writes a bug, say, no, it totally is my fault. Like, I take full responsibility. I appreciate you saying that it's not my fault, but it is, right? If you do that, that's going to come off a lot better. And then, like I said, figure out what their objections are going to be and disarm them. Address them ahead of time before they can call them out and you'll have the best chance of success. Now, I'm going to say that some people won't. They're just not going to hire you because you've been fired, especially so recently, and that's just something you're going to have to deal with. But you probably don't want to work in one of those places anyway. Probably the best place that you do work is going to be a place that's going to appreciate that, and that's kind of a filter for you. So, all right, that's all I got for you today. I got to catch my train. I'm going to probably do some videos up in the ice up there if I can. Make sure you click that subscribe button and click the bell so you don't miss the next videos I'm going to do. I'm going to be doing some pretty damn cool videos as I take that train up to Joffre Jacques or whatever it's called. All right, talk to you later. See ya.